The day I turned 18 did not feel like a beginning. It felt like a door closing behind me, slow and final, with no handle on the other side. There was no cake, no candles, no card from anyone who knew my name well enough to spell it right. Just a cardboard box sitting on the cracked linoleum floor of the administrative office at Pinewood Group Home, slumped under fluorescent lights that buzzed like tired flies. Inside that box was everything I owned in the world. 2 pairs of jeans worn thin at the knees, a handful of faded t-shirts, a paperback novel I had read so many times the spine had given up, a toothbrush, a pair of socks with a hole at the heel that I had been meaning to fix for 2 years and never did. 2 years of my life. One small box, one arm to carry it. Carol Pemberton stood behind the counter in her gray cardigan, holding a manila envelope between 2 fingers like it might bite her. She was a woman of routines and clipboards, and her face had the kind of permanent disappointment that comes from working too many years in a place where children arrive crying and leave silent. She did not look at me when she slid the envelope across the chipped formica. "Happy birthday, Caleb," she said. The words were flat. The kind of flat that means nothing at all. The kind of flat that costs nothing to say. Inside the envelope was my birth certificate, my social security card, and $75 in cash. 3 20s, a 10, and a 5. I counted it twice because counting it made my hands feel useful. "The bus station is 3 blocks east," Carol said. "There's a shelter on 10th Street if you need one. Their list fills up fast." I nodded. I waited for something else, something more. A piece of advice, a handshake, a goodbye that meant goodbye. It did not come. She turned back to her computer screen and the fluorescent light hummed, and I understood then that I had been a file, and the file was closing and the file was no longer her problem. I picked up my box and walked out into the cold. The air outside was the kind of cold that gets inside your jacket before you know it's there. Late April in Montana is still winter wearing a thin coat. The pavement glittered with morning frost, and my breath came out in pale clouds that drifted up toward a gray, undecided sky. I stood at the bottom of the concrete steps of Pinewood Group Home and listened to the lock click behind me. And for a long moment, I just stood there. Just stood. Holding my box. 18 years old. $75. 1 paperback. A toothbrush. And a sister. That was the thing. That was the only thing that mattered. Hannah was 16, still inside the system. Still up at a sister facility, 3 counties north. She had hair the color of wet hay, and eyes too serious for her face. And when I had visited her a month ago through the chain-link fence of their visiting yard, she had reached through the links and squeezed my hand and said, "You're going to come for me, right, Cal?" I had said yes. I had promised. I had been promising her things since she was 4 years old, and I had not yet broken one. That was the spark. That was the small, stubborn fire I carried in my chest as I walked east on cracked pavement toward a bus station I had never seen before. Whatever happened next, whatever the world did to me, I had to keep that fire alive. Because Hannah was waiting. Because she had no one else. I bought a ticket to North Creek for $12.40. I picked the destination half by accident. The clerk had a list of towns taped to the inside of the booth, and North Creek was at the top. And I had heard once that there was farm work up that way in the spring. I figured a man with $75 and no plan could do worse than picking a name from the top of a list. The bus was half empty. I took a window seat near the back and put my cardboard box on the seat beside me like a passenger. Outside the window, Billings gave way to suburbs. Suburbs gave way to the long brown shoulders of pasture. The mountains rose far off to the west, blue and patient, capped with snow that would not melt for another month. The road unspooled in front of us and the engine droned, and I leaned my forehead against the cold glass and tried not to think about anything at all. My phone buzzed. I almost did not answer. The number on the screen was one I did not know, and a phone call from an unknown number in my experience was almost never good news. It was a debt collector. It was a wrong number. It was someone from the home telling me I had forgotten to sign a form, and would I please come back and sign it? I almost let it ring out. But something tugged at me, some quiet thing in the back of my chest. I pressed the green button and held the phone to my ear. "Hello." A woman's voice came through the line, crisp, professional, older. The voice of someone who had read a lot of books and taken her time over each one. "Am I speaking with Caleb Brennan?" "Yes," I said. My voice sounded rough, like I had not used it all morning, which was true. "My name is Eleanor Whitfield. I am an attorney based in North Creek, Montana. I've been trying to locate you and your sister, Hannah Brennan, for several weeks now. Mr. Brennan, I am the executor of your grandfather's estate." Outside the window, the brown pasture rolled past. A red barn slid by, then a row of crooked fence posts. Then a hawk circling a far field on stiff brown wings. I did not say anything. I could not. "Mr. Brennan, are you still there?" "You have the wrong person," I said. My voice was quieter than I meant it to be. "My grandfather has been dead for 12 years. There was a silence on the other end of the line. A long one. A careful one. The kind of silence a person uses when they are choosing words the way other people choose flowers for a funeral. "No, Mr. Brennan," Eleanor Whitfield said gently. "Your grandfather, Augustus Brennan, passed away 6 weeks ago. He was 78 years old. He died in his sleep." I stopped breathing. I do not mean that as a figure of speech. I mean that for 2 full seconds, 3, maybe 4, my lungs simply did not move. The bus rolled forward. The hawk kept circling. The world went on doing what the world does. And inside my chest, there was no air at all. 6 weeks. For 12 years, I had carried a hatred for that man, so heavy it had bent my spine. He had taken us in when our parents died. He had held us for 6 months in a quiet, dusty house that smelled of pipe tobacco and old books. And then, one morning, he had been gone. A note on the kitchen table. Folded once. 3 sentences. "I am sorry. I cannot. Be brave." And then the social workers had come. And then the system had taken us. And I had spent every birthday since 6 years old believing that the old man who had abandoned me had been dead and buried and rotting somewhere I would never know. 6 weeks. He had been alive my whole life. He had been alive last month. He had been alive when I packed my cardboard box. "Mr. Brennan," Eleanor Whitfield's voice was patient. "I know this is a shock. I'm very sorry. I would like to ask if you could come to my office. There are matters of the estate that require your presence, and I'm afraid the timeline is short." "I'm on a bus," I said. I did not recognize my own voice. "I'm on a bus to North Creek right now." There was a pause. Then very softly, almost like a prayer, she said, "Oh, Caleb." She had used my first name. "I'll see you in an hour," she said. "Take a taxi from the station. I'll cover the fare. Just come straight here." She gave me the address. I wrote it on the inside cover of my paperback novel with a ballpoint pen that barely worked. My hand was shaking. The letters came out crooked. When I hung up, the bus felt smaller than it had a minute before. The window was colder. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger who had just been told that the dead were not dead, a stranger who had been lied to by his whole life. I rode the rest of the way in silence. The hawk vanished. The mountains stayed. North Creek was the kind of small town that the rest of the country forgets to remember. One main street, 2 stoplights, 3 churches, a feed store, a diner with a hand-painted sign, and a brick building from the 1920s that had been a bank once and was now divided into the kind of small offices that serve small towns. Eleanor Whitfield's office was on the 2nd floor of that brick building. The door had her name in gold paint, and the wood smelled like lemon oil and old paper. And when I stepped inside, it was so different from the bleach and fluorescent smell of Pinewood Group home that it made me dizzy. It was the smell of being somewhere that mattered, of being somewhere a person had taken their time. She rose from behind her desk when I came in. She was tall, in her late 50s, with iron-gray hair pulled back, and the sharp, kind eyes of a woman who had spent decades reading people across desks like this one. She did not flinch at the sight of me, the cardboard box under my arm, the dust on my jeans from the bus, the face of a boy who had not slept well in a week. She just looked at me, and then she said, "Thank you for coming, Caleb. Please, sit down." I sat. The chair was leather, and it creaked, and I felt like I did not belong in it. I felt like I might leave a stain. She folded her hands on her desk. They were ringed and weathered, the hands of a woman who had typed 1,000,000 pages and held 1,000 cups of coffee and signed her name on documents that changed people's lives. "I want to start," she said quietly, "by saying that I am very sorry for your loss. I know that those words will mean something different to you than to most people given what you've been told. But they are still true. Your grandfather was a man I respected very much." She paused. She let that sit. Then she opened a drawer and took out a thick folder, and she laid it on the desk between us. "Augustus Brennan came to me in the spring of 2016, she said. 10 years ago. He walked into this office on a rainy afternoon, sat in the chair where you are sitting now, and he told me he wanted to draft a will, but not an ordinary will. He had very specific conditions that would only become operative on the morning of your 18th birthday. I stared at her. He had been planning this for 10 years. He had been planning this since you were 8 years old, Caleb. Possibly longer. The version he came to me with that day had been written and rewritten so many times that the original document was almost falling apart. She tapped the folder. Every term in here was calculated, every date, every dollar. He knew almost to the day when you would receive this news. He told me, and I will never forget the way he said it, that he was building a door, and the door would open on a specific morning. And on that morning you would either walk through it or you would not. But the door would be there. The door would be ready. I could not speak. She slid the folder across the desk. On top of the folder was a small iron key, dark with age, the kind of key that opens an old country door. And beside the key was a thick envelope yellowed at the edges, sealed with a circle of dark red wax. The name on the envelope in handwriting I had not seen in 12 years, but recognized, like my own face said, to Caleb and Hannah, to be opened only by them. My eyes burned. "Caleb," Eleanor said softly, "your grandfather owned a property outside of town. 80 acres of pasture and woodland with a farmhouse and a barn in a hollow between 2 ridges about 14 miles east of here. The Brennan Ranch. It has been listed by the county as abandoned for the last 10 years. As a result, it has accumulated a substantial debt in back property taxes, slightly over $90,000. I closed my eyes. There it was, the catch. And there is one more complication. Her voice was careful now. A development corporation called Kane Development holds a lien on the property dating back to a debt your grandfather incurred in 2014 when your grandmother was ill. They have been quietly paying just enough on that lien to keep it active. They are scheduled under the terms of that lien and the unpaid taxes to foreclose and take possession of the ranch in 72 hours. 72 hours. She let that sit too. I opened my eyes. So we get nothing, I said. My voice came out cold and tired and very, very old. He left us nothing. That is not true. Eleanor's eyes were steady. Your grandfather built a very particular kind of trust. Under its terms, you and your sister have an exclusive first right to repurchase the property from the estate for a symbolic sum. He named that sum himself. She paused. $1. I let out a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob, and was neither. $1, I said. I have 75. There is a condition. She did not smile. You must clear the external debt that $90,000 in back taxes within the 72 hours that remain before the foreclosure deadline. If you do, the ranch is yours, and Hannah's free and clear for $1. If you do not, the entire property reverts to Kane Development, and your inheritance is gone forever. The room was very quiet. I looked at the iron key sitting on the desk. I looked at the wax-sealed envelope. I looked at the calm, weathered hands of the woman across from me. Why? I said. My voice cracked. Why did he do this? Why $1? Why 72 hours? Why a treasure hunt for a boy who has $75 to his name? What was he thinking? Eleanor Whitfield looked at me for a long time. The light from the window fell across her desk in a soft afternoon stripe. He told me the day he wrote this will, that he could not be in your life directly. He told me that he had paid a price for that, and the price was high, and the price was permanent. But he also told me that he had spent the last decade preparing one chance for you. One door. One key. He believed, Caleb, that what is waiting for you at the ranch is more than enough to solve the problem of the taxes. He called this inheritance your true inheritance. And he was insistent, absolutely insistent, that this letter explain everything you need to know. She slid the envelope toward me. I do not know what is in this letter. He sealed it himself. He made me promise I would never open it. I have kept that promise for 10 years, and I will keep it for the rest of my life. I picked up the envelope. The wax was cool under my thumb. The paper was so much heavier than I'd imagined a piece of paper could be. You have 72 hours, Caleb, she said. The lawyers at Kane Development are sharks. They will not grant you an extension. They will not negotiate the deadline. If you mean to do this, you must go now, and you must succeed. I picked up the iron key. It was heavier than it looked. Old iron, hand-forged maybe. It had the weight of something real. How do I get there? I asked. She wrote an address on a slip of paper and called a taxi from the desk phone. Frank Doyle will drive you, she said. He knew your grandfather. He is a good man. He will take you all the way to the gate. Tell him I sent you. I stood up. My legs felt strange. My cardboard box still sat by the door where I had left it like a small quiet witness to the most impossible morning of my life. At the door I stopped. I turned around. Miss Whitfield, I said, why didn't he ever come for us? She looked at me. For just a moment her professional calm cracked, and I saw something underneath it. Sympathy, and something else, respect. Read the letter, she said. I think you will find that the answer is more complicated, and more loving than you have been told. I closed the door behind me. Frank Doyle was waiting in the parking lot in a 1998 Ford taxi, the color of a faded sunflower. He was somewhere north of 70 with skin like cracked leather and eyes the soft blue of an old sky. When I climbed into the back seat with my box, he turned around and looked at me for a long moment without speaking. Then he nodded once slowly like a man confirming something to himself. "You look like him," he said, around the eyes. I did not answer. I did not trust my voice. He pulled out of the parking lot and turned east, and the road carried us out of town. And after the second mile, he started to talk. He did not seem to need me to talk back. He just talked the way old men talk on long drives, the way men who have spent their lives behind wheels in small towns talk. "I knew your granddaddy, son. Knew him 40 years. Augustus Brennan. Big tall fella, quiet as a stone, but the kind of quiet that listens. There's a difference, you know. Some men are quiet 'cause they got nothing to say. Your granddad was quiet 'cause he was listening. He listened so hard you could feel it, like you mattered just for sitting in his kitchen." The road narrowed. The pavement gave way to gravel, and the gravel hummed under the tires. We were climbing now slowly into a long valley between two soft ridges. The country opened around us. Cottonwoods along a creek. A red-tailed hawk perched on a fence post. A field of yellow grass bowing east in the wind. He used to come into the diner before he disappeared. Sit in the corner booth. Coffee black. Pie if Maggie had cherry. He'd nod to everyone and say nothing to nobody. Then your grandma got sick and he stopped coming. And then she passed, and then he was just gone just like that off the face of the earth. Folks figured he'd gone someplace to die in the quiet the way some animals do. Place sat empty 10 years. He looked at me in the rearview mirror. Those soft blue eyes. I drove him to the train station that night, you know. Last night before he disappeared. October 9th, 2014. I remember 'cause the leaves were just turning. He had one suitcase, a small one, and he didn't say a word the whole ride. When we got there, I started to ask him where he was going, and he just shook his head. Just shook his head. And he reached forward, and he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Frank, if you ever see those kids again, you tell them their grandfather loved them more than his own breath." Frank's voice cracked on the last word. He cleared his throat, and then he got out and walked into the station, and I never saw him again. I could not see him through the rear view anymore. My eyes had blurred. The cab rattled up a long dirt drive lined with cottonwoods whose branches had not been trimmed in a decade. Wild grass came up to the running boards. Then slowly, like a ghost emerging from fog, the house came into view. I had imagined this house 1,000 times in 12 years of foster homes and group homes. I had imagined it different ways. Sometimes warm, sometimes hateful, sometimes nothing at all. But what I saw now was not what I had imagined. It was beautiful, and it was dying. A 2-story farmhouse, white, once gray, now with a porch that sagged in the middle the way an old man's shoulders sag when he is tired. The windows on the first floor were boarded up with sheets of plywood gone soft with rain. The roof on the east side had collapsed into a dark wound that gaped open at the sky. A wild vine the color of dry blood climbed the entire west wall, reaching for the eaves like a hand reaching for help. The barn behind the house was even worse. Great red doors hanging crooked from their hinges. A weather vane in the shape of a horse pointing forever north. Frank stopped the cab at a rusted gate that had fallen halfway off its post. He shifted the car into park. He did not turn off the engine. "This is as far as I go, son," he said softly. "I gotta head back. But you call me you hear. You call me if you need anything." Miss Whitfield's got my number. You ain't alone out here no matter what it looks like. I paid him with one of the 20s from Carol's envelope. He pushed it back across the seat. On the house, he said, for your granddaddy. I stepped out into the long grass. The cab turned around in a slow, careful arc and rolled back down the drive, and I watched it go until the dust settled, and then I was alone. Alone in a way I had never been alone before. The wind moved across the pasture. It smelled like sage and wet earth and old pine somewhere far off. A meadowlark sang 2 notes and went quiet. The sun was already lowering toward the western ridge. I had maybe 3 hours of daylight left. I picked up my cardboard box. I walked up the overgrown path toward the porch. The boards creaked under my boots. The front door was thick oak, weathered to silver with the iron key plate, corroded green. I slid the key from my pocket. My hand was trembling so hard I had to use both of them. I pushed the key into the lock. It resisted. Of course it resisted. 10 years of rust and silence. I leaned my shoulder into the door and turned slow and steady. The way you turn a thing you do not want to break. It gave. With a long, scraping sigh like a sleeper waking from a dream, the lock turned. The bolt drew back. The door swung open 3 inches and stopped, caught on something behind it. I pushed harder, and the door opened the rest of the way and the past came out to meet me. The air was the first thing, a wall of cold, still, dust-laden air that smelled of wood smoke, long dead, of old paper, of the very faint, very particular smell of a house that has not been opened in 10 winters. It moved past me and out into the daylight like something that had been waiting. I stepped inside. The light from the open door fell in a long golden stripe across a floor of wide pine boards. Every surface in the room was draped in white sheets that had gone gray with dust. The shapes underneath looked like crouched animals. A chair, a sofa, a standing lamp. A grand stone fireplace stood cold and dark on the far wall. Its hearth swept clean 10 years ago, and never disturbed since. Above the mantel hung a calendar. I walked across the room. My footsteps echoed on the pine. I stood in front of the calendar and looked up at it. October 2014. The month he disappeared. In the kitchen, a coffee cup sat upside down in the drying rack beside the sink. A dish towel was folded neatly over the oven handle. A tin of coffee sat closed on the counter. In the living room, a rocking chair faced the front window angled toward the porch, as if someone had been sitting in it and had just stood up to answer the door. It was not abandonment. It was interruption. It was a life that had been paused mid-breath. A man who had walked out of his own house with one small suitcase and left every other thing exactly as he had used it that morning, because he had not been moving out. He had been disappearing. There is a difference. A man moving out takes the photographs and the coffee tin and the rocking chair. A man disappearing leaves them because the man hopes in some small, impossible way that he might come back. I sat down in the rocking chair. The cushions sighed beneath me. Through the front window, the long pasture rolled away to the west gold in the late light. I took out my phone. I called Hannah. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was small. "Cal, where are you? Are you okay? They said you left this morning and they didn't tell me where you were going. Hey, May." I had called her May since she was 3 years old when she could not yet say Hannah. Listen to me. I need you to listen and I need you not to panic. Okay, I told her. Some of it, not all of it. I told her about the lawyer, about a ranch, about a grandfather who had not been dead all this time, about a key and a letter and a deadline. I did not tell her about the boarded windows, the collapsed roof, the wild vine reaching for the eaves, the $75 in my pocket. Is it nice, Cal? Her voice was so soft. The ranch, is it pretty? I looked out across the pasture. The meadowlark sang two notes again, far off, almost lost. It's beautiful, May, I said. It needs some work, but it's beautiful. After she hung up, I sat in the rocking chair for a long time. The sun moved another inch toward the ridge. The shadows in the room stretched and softened, and I reached inside my jacket pocket, and I took out the wax-sealed envelope, his handwriting on the front, spidery, elegant. The same hand that had written my name on a birthday card I had kept folded in my paperback novel for 12 years. I broke the seal. The paper inside was thick and old, the color of cream. His handwriting filled 4 pages, both sides in careful blue ink. My dearest Caleb and my dearest Hannah, if you are reading this letter, then I am gone. Truly gone this time. And you, Caleb, are a man. I hope the years have been kinder to you than I have any right to hope. I hope you have grown tall. I hope you have grown stubborn. I hope more than anything that you have grown kind. I know you have hated me. I know it the way I know the shape of my own hand. I have lived with that knowledge for 12 years, and I have not flinched from it, because you have had every right to hate me, and I would not take that right from you. But I want you to know this one thing, and I want you to know it before anything else. I never stopped loving you. Not for one single hour. Not for one single breath. Leaving you was the worst thing I have ever done, and it was the only thing I could do. And those two truths have lived inside me side by side every day since the morning I walked out the door. Let me tell you what happened. I paused. I drew in a long breath. The light in the room was changing. I read on. Your grandmother Mariah got sick in the spring of 2014. The cancer was in her bones by the time we found it. The doctors said there was a treatment that might give her a year, maybe 2. It was experimental. It was expensive. Our insurance would not cover it. I sold what I could. A piece of the north pasture, the good tractor, some of the cattle. It was not enough. It was nowhere near enough. Then a man came to me. He was well dressed. He drove a nice car. He said he represented a small private lending company that worked with farmers in difficult positions. He said he wanted to help. He said the terms were fair. He said it was a community investment. I was a foolish, desperate old man, and I signed his papers. The company was not what he said. It was a front for something larger. A predator dressed up in a kind suit. The loan was designed in such a way that it could never be fully paid back. Every payment I made disappeared into fees and interest, and the principal never moved. They were not trying to collect a debt. They were trying to take the land. Your grandmother died in August. 2 months later, the men came back. They did not want money. They wanted my signature on a sales contract. They wanted the ranch. I refused. And then, Caleb, they started to talk about you. I stopped reading. I had to. The paper was shaking in my hand. I read on. They had learned that the state had placed you and your sister in my custody after your parents' accident. They had learned that this made you in the language of the law dependents. They had learned that a man who owes a great deal of debt and who cannot pay it can be declared an unfit guardian, and that his dependents can be taken from him. They told me in this very kitchen that they had friends in the state office, that they could make this happen. That as long as you were with me, you were leverage. They said, and I will remember the exact words until the day I die. You will sign the papers, or your grandchildren will go into the system, and then you will sign anyway. Only by then it will be too late to get them back. I sat in this kitchen with you two upstairs asleep, and I understood that I had two choices. I could keep you, and lose you anyway, and lose the ranch, and lose everything. Or I could disappear. Leave you to the state, which is a cold place, but a safer place than the shadow these men had thrown over my house. Sever the chain. Take the thread away from you by removing the only thing that connected you to it, which was me. If I was gone, I was no longer your guardian. If I was no longer your guardian, you were no longer leverage. The debt would still be mine. The threat would die when I did. The ranch might survive. And you might one day, when the law had run out of clocks to wind, come home to it. I chose to lose you so that I might one day give you back yourselves. I wrote that note on the kitchen table. I packed one suitcase. Frank Doyle drove me to the train station. I did not look back, because if I had looked back, I would not have gone. I have not had a day since then, Caleb, when I did not think of you. I have not had a night since then, when I did not pray for you. I lived a small, quiet life, in a small, quiet place. I worked with my hands. I saved every dollar I could. I planned. I prepared. I built the door you are now walking through. I was not absent. I was hiding. There is a difference. I hope in time you will come to see it. Your loving grandfather, Augustus Brennan. I do not remember the moment the paper fell from my hand. I only remember finding it later on the floor at my feet. I do not remember crying either. I only remember that when I tried to draw a breath, there was no breath there. And when I tried to stand, my legs would not hold me. And so I sat back down in the rocking chair, and I put my face in my hands, and I made a sound I had never made before in my whole life. A sound like something breaking that had been holding the shape of a boy for 12 years. He had not left me. He had been holding me the whole time, from far away, with both his hands. The shadow that had lived in my chest since I was 6 years old. The dark, heavy stone of he did not want us lifted up from inside me, and the space it left behind was so vast and so sudden that for a long minute I could not understand the geography of my own chest. I had not known how much room that stone had taken up. I had not known there was anything else in there. I sat in the rocking chair as the light slid across the floor, and the room turned gold, and then amber, and then a deep, slow blue. Outside, the meadowlark went quiet. A coyote called once far off, and another answered, and they sang together for a moment, and then stopped. The sky above the western ridge turned the color of a bruise healing. I picked up the letter. I read the last paragraph again. I had missed it the first time. I had been too undone. I have done what I could to give you a fighting chance, Caleb. I lived a frugal life after I left. I saved. I planned. This house is not just a home. It is a vault. Your grandmother used to say that she could hide sunshine inside a shadow. Look for the place where the work was done, where the sweat of my life soaked into the wood. The answer is there. Don't let them win. Make this place your home. It is all I have ever wanted for you, the place where the work was done. I lifted my eyes. Through the front window across the long gold pasture, the barn stood dark and crooked against the dying light. The great red doors hung open like a mouth that had been trying to say something for 10 years. The barn. It had to be the barn. I stood up. My legs held me now. Something cold and steady had moved into my chest, where the stone had been. And it was not grief. It was not anger. It was something I had not felt in 12 years, and it took me a moment to recognize it. It was purpose. I walked into the kitchen. I opened the pantry. On the top shelf, just where a careful man might leave a thing he hoped would still be useful. In a decade, I found an old brass oil lantern and a tin of lamp oil. The oil tin was still half full. My hands shook as I filled the lantern. They shook as I struck the match. But the wick caught and the flame steadied and the small golden light pushed back against the gathering dark. I picked up the lantern. I walked back through the living room. I stopped at the open front door and looked out across the long pasture toward the barn. The sun had set. The sky was deep blue going to black. The first star had come out above the eastern ridge. The wind moved through the long grass, and the grass bowed. Somewhere in that dark barn, my grandfather had hidden a door. I stepped out onto the porch. The boards creaked under my boots. The lantern swung in my hand, throwing slow shadows across the porch rail. I started walking. The grass was tall and wet around my legs. The lantern light bobbed and rocked. Behind me, the house stood quiet and waiting. Ahead, the barn rose dark and patient against the fading sky, its great red doors yawning open, like a mouth that had been waiting for me to come. I did not look back. I walked toward the barn. The grass was wetter than I had expected. By the time I reached the barn, my jeans were soaked to the knees and my boots squelched with each step. The lantern swung in my hand and threw a small, unsteady disk of light across the rough plank wall of the barn, and the wall was so much bigger up close than it had looked from the porch. 20 feet high. A roofline that sagged in the middle like a tired old back. The great red doors had once been painted, but the paint had peeled to almost nothing, and what was left clung to the wood in long, curling strips like dry skin. I stopped in front of the open door. Inside the barn was black. Not dim. Not shadowed. Black. The kind of black that swallows light and asks for more. I lifted the lantern higher, and the flame pushed maybe 10 feet into the dark before it gave up and went no further. I stood there for a long moment. The wind moved through the rafters somewhere above me and made a soft, hollow sound like a man breathing in his sleep. 12 years old. That is how old I was the last time I'd been afraid of the dark. 12 years old in a foster home in Great Falls, when a man who was not supposed to come into my room had come into my room. I had not been afraid of the dark before that. I had been afraid of it ever since. But Hannah was waiting, and the deadline was ticking. And somewhere inside this dark, my grandfather had hidden a door. I stepped through the opening. The smell hit me first. Old hay, lamp oil, the faint, sweet rot of damp wood, the dry mineral smell of a place that has been closed and forgotten and watched over by no one. I lifted the lantern again, and now I could see further, and the dark gave up its first secrets in slow, reluctant pieces. A tractor, old, rusted, one tire half flat. It sat in the middle of the floor like a sleeping animal that had died standing up. Stalls along the west wall, 6 of them, doors hanging open, empty mangers, a coil of leather harness draped over a rail, the leather gone hard as bone, a workbench along the east wall long and low with a row of mason jars on a shelf above it, each jar full of nails sorted by size, the labels in his handwriting, 6D common, 8D common, 16D common. He had labeled the jars. 10 years ago, he had stood at this bench and labeled jars of nails for a future he did not know if he would ever see again, and someone someday would need to know which jar held Which nail? I felt my throat close up. I walked the length of the bench. I held the lantern over each section, every tool in its place. A hammer hanging from a peg. A handsaw above it, the blade still sharp under the dust. A wooden plane. A draw knife. A row of chisels lined up by size, each one with a small leather cap over the blade. I ran my hand along the surface of the bench. The wood was scarred and stained dark in the center where his hands had worked for 40 years. Smooth as glass in places, pitted in others. The place where the sweat of my life soaked into the wood. This was it. This had to be it. I started searching. I tapped the underside of the bench. Solid. I checked the drawers. Sawdust and wood shavings and small unfinished projects. A handle for an axe half whittled. A wooden whistle. A doll's chair, 3 legs done the 4th, still a square of stock waiting to be turned. I picked it up. I held it in the lantern light. The wood was cherry dark with age. He had been making a chair for a doll. For Hannah, maybe. She had been 4 years old. He had been making her a doll's chair. I set it down carefully because I did not trust myself to hold it any longer. I checked the walls behind the bench. I tapped them. They sounded solid. I checked the floor under my boots. The planks were wide and dark. The nails sunk deep. I dropped to my knees and crawled the length of the bench, sweeping the lantern low along the floor, looking for a seam, a notch, a board that did not match. Nothing. I stood up. I walked away from the bench. I tried the stalls. I tried the corners. I tried the back wall. I climbed up to the loft on a ladder that swayed under my weight, and I held the lantern high over a hay floor that was mostly rotted now, and I saw nothing but old straw and a few abandoned nests where barn swallows had raised their young in the summers when no one had been here to see. An hour passed, maybe 2. The cold had settled deeper. My fingers ached around the lantern handle. I sat down on an upturned bucket and put my face in my hands. It is not here, I thought. It is gone. Whatever he hid, somebody found it. A vandal, a drifter, a teenager on a dare. Or maybe there was never anything here. Maybe an old man dying alone had written a letter that was more dream than truth. Maybe I had ridden a bus and taken a taxi and walked through a door and come to this dark barn to find nothing. The deadline pressed against my ribs. 46 hours. I lifted my head. I looked at the back of the barn one more time. The lantern light fell across a corner I had not searched properly because the corner was half buried under a collapsed stack of old hay bales that had given up their shape years ago and settled into a dense mound of moldy fiber. I had passed that corner 3 times without looking at it. Why would a man stack hay against a back wall? He would not. A farmer would not. A farmer stacks hay in the loft, or along the rail of a stall, or near the door for the morning feeding. A farmer does not stack hay in a back corner where it serves no purpose. Unless he wanted to hide something. I stood up. I walked to the mound of old hay. I set the lantern on a beam at eye level, and I started to dig. The hay was wet and crumbling, and it stank, and pieces of it fell apart in my hands like wet paper. I had to use my forearms. I pulled handful after handful, throwing it behind me, and clouds of dust rose up and made my eyes burn and my throat close, and I coughed and I kept digging. 10 minutes. 15. Then my hand hit wood. Not the rough plank of the barn wall. Something different. Something smoother. I cleared the rest of the hay away in a frenzy, now both arms going. Behind the mound set into the back wall of the barn was a small door, maybe 4 feet high. The wood was old, but it had been planed. The hinges had been oiled in the last 10 years. I could see the dark stain of grease on the iron. There was a wooden latch, no lock. I lifted the latch. The door did not open. I pulled harder. The door had swelled in its frame. I put my shoulder against it. Once. Twice. On the third try, the wood gave with a crack like a small bone breaking, and the door swung inward into deeper dark, and a smell came out of it. The smell of his life. Pipe tobacco, lamp oil, cedar shavings, old leather, a faint trace of coffee. The exact smell that had lived in the front room of the kitchen during the 6 months I had lived in this place when I was 6 years old. A smell I had not been able to name in 12 years, and that I recognized now the way a man recognizes the voice of his mother in a crowd. I picked up the lantern. I stepped through the doorway. It was a workshop. His workshop. His real one. The one nobody knew about. The room was maybe 12 feet by 10. A heavy oak bench ran along the far wall. Above the bench, a pegboard held a row of finer tools than the ones in the main barn. Files, calipers, a leather pouch of jeweler's screwdrivers, a small vise, a second lantern on a shelf identical to the one in my hand. He had kept a spare. Of course he had. He kept a spare of everything. On the right wall, a small wood stove with a tin chimney pipe, a neat stack of split kindling beside it, a box of matches on the floor. On the left wall, a narrow bookshelf, 5 shelves, books in worn cloth bindings. The titles I could make out in the lantern light were about farming, animal husbandry, beekeeping, building foundations. There were 2 volumes of poetry. There was a worn King James Bible with a leather cover gone soft as cloth, and there were ledger books, 3 of them, tall, dark green, bound in canvas. The kind a man keeps to track years. I stood in the middle of that small room, and I did not move. I could feel him. He had been here. He had been here recently. The dust on the bench was thinner than the dust in the rest of the barn. The kindling beside the stove was dry, not rotted. Somebody had been splitting kindling in this room in the last few years. He had been here. I shook the thought off. I did not have time for what it meant. The work was done in this room, the letter had said, where the sweat of his life soaked into the wood. I knelt down beside the heavy oak bench. I held the lantern low, and I saw it. Under the bench, in a section maybe 2 feet square, the floorboards were different. The rest of the workshop floor was made of wide, rough planks the color of old smoke. But this small section was newer, smoother, the wood lighter, the grain finer. The nails were bright, clean steel, not the dark, rusted iron of the rest of the floor. He had laid this section himself, recently, in the last 10 years. I set the lantern down on the bench. I felt along the edge of the patched section with my fingertips. There were no handles. There was no seam I could see in the lantern light. But at one corner, when I pressed in just the right way, I felt a small notch in the wood, big enough for 2 fingertips. I hooked my fingers in. I pulled. The patch came up in one piece, a trapdoor, counterweighted somehow because it lifted easier than its size suggested. Underneath, a hollow space had been dug into the dirt floor of the barn, lined with old cedar boards, dry and clean. Inside the hollow space sat a steel box. It was heavy. I could see that before I touched it. Olive green, the paint chipped along the edges, the corners reinforced with iron. The kind of box a soldier might have brought home from a war. There was no key lock, just a combination dial set into the lid. 4 wheels of polished brass numbered 0 through 9. My hands were shaking again. I lifted the box out of its hollow with both arms. It was heavier than I had thought, 40 pounds, maybe more. I set it on the workbench. I set the lantern beside it. I sat down on a low wooden stool that I had not noticed before, and the stool was sized exactly right for a man sitting at this bench. And I understood that he had built this stool too, with these hands in this room in the years he had been a ghost. I rolled the wheels of the combination dial. I tried the obvious things first. His birthday. He had been born on March 11th, 0311. Nothing. My grandmother's birthday. The date was in my paperback in the inscription of the birthday card I had kept folded inside it. May 9th, 0509. Nothing. My birthday. April 28th, 0428. Nothing. Hannah's birthday. September 14th, 0914. Nothing. The date he had disappeared. October 9th, 2014, 1009. Nothing. I tried the year. 2014. Nothing. I tried the year I had been born. 2008. Nothing. I tried his wedding anniversary, which I did not know, so I just guessed and got nothing. I sat back on the stool. The lantern flickered. My breath came out in pale clouds, and I realized for the first time how cold the room was and how late it had gotten, and how tired I was. I leaned my forehead against the cold metal of the box. He had not made this easy. Of course he had not. He had spent 10 years building a door. He would not have hidden the key under the welcome mat. I closed my eyes. I tried to think the way he would have thought. Look for the place where the work was done. That was the first letter's clue. I had followed that and it had brought me here. So the answer to the lock was something connected to me, to us, to Hannah, to something only we would know. But I did not know anything about him. That was the problem. I had been 6 years old when I lost him. I had memories that were more pictures than thoughts. A pipe, a pair of suspenders, a big warm hand on the back of my neck when I had fallen and skinned my knee, a voice singing softly in another room. None of it was numbers. And then I remembered the first envelope, the wax-sealed letter from Eleanor Whitfield's office. There had been something else in that envelope, hadn't there? Something small. I had pulled out the letter and read it and broken in pieces, and I had stopped paying attention to anything else. I dug into my jacket pocket. The envelope was still there. I opened it and reached inside past the folded letter down to the bottom. My fingers closed on something small and cold. I pulled it out, a silver locket, tarnished black at the edges, round about the size of a quarter. On the front, an etched design of climbing vines. I held it under the lantern. The chain was broken. He had not meant for anyone to wear it. He had meant for someone to open it. I worked my fingernail into the seam. The locket clicked open. Inside, on the left side, a tiny photograph, so small I almost missed it. A young woman in a Sunday dress holding flowers, smiling at the camera as if the camera was a person she loved. My grandmother, Mariah. I had never seen her young. On the right side, where another picture should have been, was a small, flat oval of polished silver, and scratched into the silver in careful, tiny letters that he must have made with the point of a needle were 4 numbers, 8, 4, 6, 2. I held the locket in my left hand. I rolled the combination dial with my right. 8, 4, 6, 2. I pulled the latch. It clicked open. I lifted the lid of the steel box, and for a long moment I just looked, because what was inside the box did not seem like a thing that could be real. Money. Stacks of it. Bound with rubber bands gone slack with age, but still holding. $100 bills. 20s. 50s. bundled in tight, neat blocks the way only a careful man bundles money. The bills were old, but they were not ruined. He had kept them dry. He had kept them safe. He had kept them ready. I lifted one bundle out. I counted it. $5,000. I lifted out another. Another. My hands shook so badly I lost count twice and had to start over. $95,000. He had hidden $95,000 in a steel box under the floor of his secret workshop, and he had given me the key to it in a locket with my grandmother's picture. And the answer to the lock had been the numbers scratched in silver, in a place only love would think to look. I sat down hard on the stool. I covered my mouth with one hand. The other hand, still holding a bundle of money, was shaking so hard the bills rustled against each other like dry leaves. $90,000 for the taxes. $5,000 left over. He had given us a future in cash sitting under the floor of a barn that had been waiting for me since I was 6 years old. But the box was not empty yet. Underneath the money, separated by a sheet of waxed brown paper, lay other things. I lifted the wax paper. The deed to the property, folded once. The original in heavy cream paper with the county seal in red wax. Free and clear except for those taxes. A second envelope, thicker than the first. Heavier. My name on the front in his handwriting. Caleb. Read this 1 second. A small black USB drive. Old. Probably 10 years old. A label on it in his hand. Evidence. And a leather-bound book. Maybe 6 inches by 8. The leather was soft and dark, oiled by hands. There was no title on the cover. When I opened it, the first page held just one line written in his careful blue ink. A record in case I do not live to tell it myself. I closed the book gently. I did not have the strength to read it yet. I set everything carefully on the workbench. I sat on the stool in the cold workshop with the lantern flickering, and I let my breathing slow and I let my hands stop shaking. And I listened to the wind move across the high roof of the barn outside. For the first time in 12 years, I was not poor. For the first time in 12 years, I had a choice. I looked at the second envelope. I picked it up. I almost broke the seal there in the workshop, but something stopped me. Something told me this letter needed walls around it. A roof. A room where a man could read it sitting down. I gathered everything carefully. I put the deed and the envelope and the USB drive and the leather book into an empty feed sack I found hanging from a peg. I left the money in the steel box, closed the lid, set the combination back to 0000. I lifted the box and set it under the bench out of sight. Then I picked up the lantern and the feed sack, and I walked back out through the small door and I latched it behind me, and I covered it again with the moldy hay, because some habits of caution come fast. And I walked back through the dark barn to the open red doors, and I stepped out into the night. The sky was full of stars. The cold was deep now. My breath came out in long white columns. The house across the pasture sat dark and waiting, and a single yellow light shone from the front window where I had left the kerosene lamp burning on the kitchen table. I walked back across the grass. I climbed the porch steps. I went inside. I set the feed sack on the kitchen table. I lit the kerosene lamp brighter. I sat down in the chair where my grandfather had sat 10 years ago, drinking his last cup of coffee, and I opened the second envelope. His handwriting was firmer here, less raw than the first letter. This was a letter from a man who had said the hard things already, and now had practical work to do. Caleb. If you are reading this, you have found the box. You have found the money. The taxes are within your reach. Hannah will come home. I have done what I can to give you that. But now I have to tell you the rest. Because the money is only half of what you found. The rest is what makes the money matter. You have two roads in front of you, and I will not choose between them for you. This is your life now, yours and your sister's. You get to choose what kind of life it is. The first road is the easy road, and I want you to hear me when I tell you that there is no shame in it. None. You can pay the taxes. You can clear the lien. You can put the deed in your name and Hannah's, and then you can sell this place. You can sell it to the highest bidder. And that bidder will almost certainly be a man named Walter Kane, who runs Kane Development Corporation, and who will pay you a great deal of money to make this property his. He will offer you, I would guess, somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000. He has been trying to get this land for 12 years. He wants it badly. He will pay almost anything. If you take that road, you and Hannah will start your adult lives with more money than most people see at 28, let alone 18. You can pay for college. You can rent an apartment in a city. You can take your sister far away from Montana and from the long shadow of my mistakes. You can live a quiet life, a safe life, a life with no ghosts in it. You have earned an easy road, Caleb. You have earned it 10 times over. The second road is the hard road, and I will tell you the truth because I owe you the truth. The hard road is the harder one by a great deal. The second road is this. You pay the taxes. You keep the land. You refuse to sell. You make this place your home. You learn how to fix a roof. You learn how to grow a garden. You learn how to mend a fence. You take the broken thing I left, and you put it back together piece by piece with your own hands. You spend the next 10 years of your life rebuilding what I could not finish, and you do it on land that has been in our family for 4 generations. And you do not let Walter Kane have 1 acre of it. To help you on that road, I have left you a second tool. The leather book and the small black drive are the second tool. They are not money. They are a different kind of currency. In that book, I kept a record. Every payment I ever made on the predatory loan. Every threat that was ever made against me. Every visit from every man Kane Development ever sent to this house. Names, dates, words spoken. I wrote it all down. I started writing it down in 2014, the week I signed the loan, because I sensed even then that one day a record might matter. The drive contains scanned copies of the original loan documents, which carry clauses that violate Montana state lending law in at least 3 places. It also contains a sworn affidavit signed and notarized from another Montana farmer, who was destroyed by the same company under a different name. His name is John Hassel. He lives in Bozeman now. He is a friend. This evidence is not enough to put Walter Kane in prison. I tried. I tried for years. The man has lawyers who are very good at staying just barely on the legal side of every line. But it is more than enough to do something else. It is more than enough to bring Walter Kane and his entire business into the daylight. Reporters, state regulators, other ruined families. There are at least 6 other ranches in this part of Montana that he has taken in the same way. If their stories come out, if the loan documents come out, if my record comes out, his business will not survive it. Giants hate the light, Caleb. Walter Kane is a giant. He has built his life in the dark. The day this evidence is made public is the day his giant starts to fall. This is your shield. And if you want it to be your sword, the choice is yours. To take the money and walk away from the past, or to use the past to build a future on the only land we have ever truly owned. I will not tell you which to choose. I will only say this. If you choose the second road, you will not walk it alone. The people of North Creek remember me. They will remember you when they learn who you are. Ezra Henderson at the hardware store knows everything. He has been my friend for 40 years, and he kept my secret like his own. Go to him. He is waiting for you. Whatever you choose, Caleb, know that my love is with you. My love has been with you every day for 12 years, and it does not stop now. It will not stop. It is the one thing about a man that doesn't die when he does. Your grandfather, Augustus Brennan I, folded the letter slowly. I set it on the table. The kerosene lamp burned low. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, somewhere in the dark pasture, a coyote called, and another answered. 2 roads, the easy one and the hard one. I sat at the table for a long time. I thought about Hannah. I thought about what her life had looked like for the last 12 years. The group homes, the sister facility with the chain-link fence, the way she had looked at me through that fence last month. That serious face, those eyes too old for her age. I thought about giving her a clean apartment in a city, a college fund, a car of her own, safety, comfort, no ghosts. I thought about the easy road, and the easy road was a beautiful thing to think about. And I let myself think about it for a long time. Then I thought about the rocking chair by the window, where my grandfather had been sitting when the men first came. I thought about the doll's chair in the workbench drawer, 3 legs done, the 4th still waiting. I thought about the calendar above the mantel, still turned to October 2014. I thought about a man riding a train alone in the dark with 1 suitcase, carrying the weight of a choice he had made for me, without my knowing. I thought about taking money from the children of the men who had paid him to leave, and I knew the way you know your own face in a mirror, which road was mine. I picked up the phone. The signal was weak this far from town. I dialed Eleanor Whitfield's number anyway, and after 3 rings she answered. It was almost 10 o'clock at night. "Caleb, I found it," I said. My voice was steady. I did not recognize my own steadiness. I found the money. I found the deed. I found everything he left. There was a sharp, small sound on the other end of the line, the sound of a woman who has been waiting 10 years for a phone call to go a certain way and has just heard it go that way. "What do you want to do, Caleb?" I looked across the table at the leather book and the black drive and the deed. First thing in the morning, I said, "I want you to wire the $90,000 to the county tax office. Clear it before 9 o'clock. Then I want you to send a letter to Walter Kane's attorney. Tell them the Brennan family has reclaimed the property in accordance with the terms of the trust. Tell them the back taxes are paid in full, and the lien is to be released by close of business tomorrow." "Yes," she said quietly. "And then tell them this. Tell them the property is not for sale. Not at any price. Not now. Not ever." A pause. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "Caleb." Her voice was very gentle. "Kane will not take that well. He has been waiting 12 years. He will come at you. He will come personally. He is that kind of man. Let him come." I hung up. I sat at the table for another moment. Then I stood up. I walked through the dark house to the front room where the rocking chair faced the window. I sat down in the chair. Outside, the stars wheeled slow above the ridge. The single yellow lamp behind me threw my shadow long across the porch boards. I took out my phone. I called Hannah one more time. She answered on the first ring this time. She had been waiting. "Cal." "May, I have to tell you something." "Okay. It's bad and it's good. Both." I told her everything. The letter, the hidden workshop, the steel box, the $95,000. The other letter. The choice. I told her the choice. She was quiet for a long time. So long I thought the call had dropped. May you there? I'm here. Her voice was small. Then it grew. Cal, listen. Listen to me. That money, the money Kane would pay, that's not money. What is it? It's blood, Cal. It's blood money. It's the price of every year we spent in those homes. Every birthday nobody sang. Every time I asked for you and they said you couldn't come. That's what's in those dollars. I don't want it. I'd rather be poor in our own house than rich in some apartment they paid for. I'd rather be cold and free than warm and bought. Don't take it, Cal. Don't you dare take it. I closed my eyes. I leaned my head back against the rocking chair. She was 16 years old. She had been 4 years old when our grandfather walked out of our lives. She had not known him long enough to remember the shape of his face. And she had said it before. I said it almost word for word, the same answer I had reached at the kitchen table. We were his grandchildren. Both of us. All the way down. All right, May, I said. All right. We stay. We stay, she said. There was a long quiet on the line. Then she said very softly, Cal, will you come for me? Yes. Soon. As soon as I can. Promise. I promise. I hung up. I sat in the rocking chair and watched the stars through the window until the kerosene lamp behind me guttered low and went out. And then I sat in the dark a while longer listening to the old house breathe around me. Sometime past midnight, the phone in my pocket buzzed. A text message from Eleanor Whitfield. Kane's attorney just called my office. They want a meeting. Tomorrow afternoon. At the property. Walter Kane himself wants to come. I stared at the screen for a long moment in the dark. Then I typed 2 words and sent them. Let him. I put the phone down. I sat in my grandfather's rocking chair in my grandfather's house on my grandfather's land. The stars moved slow above the ridge. The wind moved soft across the pasture. Somewhere out in the dark, a coyote sang to another coyote, and they sang together for a long, quiet moment. And then they went still. I closed my eyes. He was coming. The man who had taken 12 years from me. The man who had driven my grandfather into a train station in the dark of an October night. With one small suitcase, the man who had thought he could buy the bones of my family for a few $100,000 was driving up that long gravel road tomorrow to look me in the eye. I was 18 years old. I had $75 and 1 paperback novel and a sister who was waiting for me to come home. And I had a leather book full of names and a small black drive full of evidence and a grandfather's voice in my head saying, "Giants hate the light." I would be ready. I rocked once in the chair. Slow. Steady. Tomorrow, he was coming. Tomorrow I would be the one waiting at the door. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the rocking chair until the cold drove me to find a blanket in a hallway closet. And then I sat with the blanket around my shoulders and watched the dark window turn slowly the color of slate, and then the color of pewter, and then the soft pale blue of a Montana morning in spring. The stars went out one by one. The eastern ridge took its shape. A meadowlark sang 2 notes, and another answered. And the long pasture in front of the house came back to life, 1 acre at a time, as the light reached it. I had been awake for almost 24 hours. I did not feel tired. I felt the way a man feels the morning he is going to fight someone bigger than him. quiet, hollowed out, ready. At 7 o'clock, I made coffee on the propane stove. The stove had not been used in 10 years, but the propane tank outside still held pressure, and the burner caught on the third strike of the match. I used a tin of coffee from the cupboard. It was old, and it tasted thin and dusty, but it was hot. And it was made in his kitchen, and I drank it standing at the window, watching the sun climb above the ridge. At 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed. Eleanor Whitfield. Wire sent. Tax office confirms receipt at 8:47. Lien release on Kane's side requested. Kane himself confirmed visit at 2 p.m. He is driving up from Bozeman with one attorney. The taxes were paid. The deadline had not killed us. I sat down on the porch step in the cold morning. I held the warm tin cup in both hands, and I looked out across the land that was now legally mine and Hannah's for $1. And I tried to feel something that felt like victory. I did not feel victory. I felt the shape of what was coming. At 10 o'clock, I drove into town. The truck out behind the barn was a 1989 Ford Blue, once gray, now with a cracked windshield and 4 tires that had somehow held their air for a decade. The key was where the letter had said it would be, in a coffee can on a shelf in the workshop. The engine did not want to start the first time. It did not want to start the second time. The third time it caught rough and shuddering, and I sat in the cab with my hands on the wheel and I let it idle for 10 minutes before I trusted it to carry me the 14 miles to North Creek. The hardware store sat on the south end of Main Street. Henderson's, since 1962. The sign hung from 2 black chains and creaked in the wind. The windows had not been washed in a while. A bell rang when I pushed the door open. The man behind the counter was old, 72, maybe more. White hair cut short, white stubble, blue eyes the color of a clear morning. He wore a green wool shirt and a leather apron, and he was wrapping a bundle of carriage bolts in brown paper when I walked in. He looked up. He looked at me. He did not look away. He set the bolts down very slowly. "You're his boy," he said. "Caleb." "I know." He came around the counter. He was not a tall man, but he carried himself like one. He walked up to me and put a hand on each of my shoulders and looked me in the face, and his blue eyes filled up, and he did not wipe them. "I have been waiting," he said, "for you to walk through that door. For a very, very long time." I did not know what to say. He took his hands off my shoulders. He cleared his throat. He turned and went behind the counter and busied himself for a moment with a coffee pot on a hot plate, and when he turned back, his eyes were dry again, and he was a hardware store man pouring coffee for a customer. "You take it black?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Like him." He handed me the cup. "Sit." There were 2 wooden chairs by the wood stove in the corner. We sat. He drank his coffee. He looked at me for a long moment over the rim of his mug. "You found the box," he said. It was not a question. "How did you know?" "Because if you hadn't, you wouldn't be sitting in my store. You'd be on a bus back to Billings." He knew that. He counted on it. He took another long sip. "Caleb, I'm going to tell you some things now. Things I've been holding for a long time. Your grandfather made me swear on the grave of my wife that I would not say one word of these things to anyone until you walked through that door of your own accord. I gave him my word. I have kept it. I'm about to break it with his permission, because you are the door he was waiting for." I waited. "Your granddaddy never left North Creek." "Not really." I set my cup down. The coffee sloshed. "What?" "He left in the official sense. He took a train out of here in October of 2014. He had to. The men who had threatened him needed to believe he was gone. The state needed to believe he was gone. You two children needed to be far enough away from him that the law could not call you leverage anymore. So he went. He went to Idaho first, Coeur d'Alene. He took a job in a lumber yard, lived in a boarding house. 6 months. He paused, and then he came back. I could not speak. Not to the ranch, never to the ranch. The ranch was watched. Kane had a man drive past it once a week for the first 3 years. They were waiting to see if he would come home. He did not come home. He came here. He came to me. Ezra Henderson set his cup down. Behind this store, there is a small one-room cabin. My father built it in 1948. I used it for storage. Your granddaddy lived in that cabin on and off for the last 9 years of his life. Not full-time. He moved around. He would stay a month, then leave for 2. He worked seasonal jobs. He saved money. Every dollar he could save, he saved. And every 2 or 3 months, he would come back and stay with me. And at night, when the town was asleep, we would drive out to the ranch and he would work. He patched the roof of the barn once with my help. He kept the well house from collapsing. He sealed the workshop floor where he buried the box. He laid the boards over the hidden door. He oiled the hinges. He kept the deed file with my safe. He looked at me steady. He never went into the house, not once. He could not bear it. He said the house belonged to you children, and he would not enter it again until the day you walked through the front door yourselves. He kept the workshop because the workshop was his. The house, he said, was Mariah's and yours, and his job was just to keep the roof from falling in until you came home. I closed my eyes. He had been here. He had been here the whole time, 20 miles away, sleeping in a one-room cabin behind a hardware store. 12 years. He saw you once, Ezra said quietly. I opened my eyes. You don't remember it. You were 9 years old. You were at a school assembly in Billings, a spelling bee. He drove 400 miles round trip to sit in the back row of an auditorium and watch you spell the word patience in front of 100 kids. He came back here that night, and he sat in that chair where you are sitting now, and he cried so hard, I thought he was going to break a rib. He said you stood up so straight. He said your hands did not shake. He said your mother would have been proud. I covered my face with both hands. I had won that spelling bee. I had a small plastic trophy in my cardboard box right now, folded inside one of the t-shirts. I had carried it with me from foster home to foster home for 9 years. He had been there. He had been in the back row. Ezra waited. He let me have my moment. He had seen a lot of grown men cry in his life. He did not look away, but he did not crowd me either. He just let it pass. After a long time, he spoke again. Caleb, I need to tell you one more thing, and then we need to talk about what happens this afternoon. I lifted my head. What? 2 months ago, your granddaddy started feeling poorly. Heart, the doctor said. He had been smoking that pipe for 60 years. He went into the hospital in Helena for tests, and when he came back, he came to this store, and he sat in that chair and he told me he had a few weeks left. Maybe a month. He told me he was going to spend it getting things ready. He went out to the ranch every night that last month, worked by lantern, made sure that the workshop was just right, made sure the locket was in the envelope, made sure the letter was right, made sure Eleanor Whitfield had every piece of paper in order. Ezra's voice was very quiet now. He died here, in the cabin, 6 weeks ago. I found him in the morning. He was sitting in a chair by the window facing east, watching the sun come up. He had a photograph in his hand. You and Hannah, the school photo from when you were 5 and 3. He had been carrying that photograph in his pocket for 13 years. The corners were worn down to felt. Ezra Henderson reached into the chest pocket of his green wool shirt. He brought out a folded photograph. He passed it across to me. I unfolded it with hands that did not feel like my own. Me at 5 years old. Hannah at 3. We were on a porch swing somewhere I did not remember. The picture had been carried so long that the colors had faded almost to white. The corners had been folded and unfolded 1,000 times until they were soft as old cloth. There was a brown stain at one corner. Coffee, maybe. Maybe something else. He had held this photograph in his hand when he died. I held it now. You keep that, Ezra said. It's been waiting for you. I put it in my shirt pocket against my chest, where his pocket had been. I cleared my throat. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. I drank what was left of the coffee, and the coffee was cold now, and I set the cup down on the wood stove ledge. Mr. Henderson, I said, Walter Kane is coming to the ranch at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Ezra's face went still. Then you and I, he said, have some preparing to do. We spent the next 3 hours in his cabin behind the hardware store. It was a small, clean room. A cot in the corner with a wool blanket folded at the foot of it. A small wood stove. A table by the window where my grandfather had been sitting when he died. A shelf of books. A coffee can full of pencils. The cabin smelled exactly like the workshop in the barn. Pipe tobacco, lamp oil, cedar leather. The smell I had known when I was 6. The smell of him. We worked. We made copies of every page of the leather book. Ezra had a copier in the back of the hardware store, the kind small town stores still have, and we ran the pages through it one at a time. We made copies of the loan documents. We made copies of the affidavits on the USB drive, which we read together on Ezra's old desktop computer. The originals went into a steel filing box that Ezra kept in a safe in the floor of the cabin. The copies went into a manila envelope that I put in my truck. A second set of copies, just the most damning pages, went into a smaller envelope that Ezra mailed by registered post to a reporter at the Montana Tribune named Sam Riley, whose name and address my grandfather had written on the inside cover of the leather book, in case it became necessary. That's the dead man's switch, Ezra said. Riley won't open it unless he doesn't hear from you within 48 hours or unless I call him myself. But it's in the mail now, it's in the mail. Kane has people in the postal service in Bozeman. He'll know it went out. He'll know what it means. I nodded. I called Eleanor Whitfield. I told her what we had done. She approved. She gave me one more piece of advice. Don't threaten him, she said. Let him do the talking. Let him reach the conclusion himself. He's a smart man. Smart men understand a corner when they're in it. If you push him, he'll push back. If you let him see the corner, he'll find his own way out. Yes, ma'am. And Caleb. Yes, ma'am. You don't have to be brave. What? You don't have to be brave today. You don't have to look strong. You don't have to be older than you are. You just have to tell the truth. The evidence is the evidence. The truth is the truth. You are 18, and you are scared, and that is allowed. Just tell him the truth. Your grandfather did the hard part already. The hard part is done. All you have to do today is open the door. I thanked her. I hung up. At 1:30, I drove back out to the ranch. I parked the truck in the gravel turnaround beside the porch. The day had warmed. The grass was drying. The sky was a pale, clean blue. A red-tailed hawk circled high over the pasture, riding a thermal in slow, patient loops. I sat on the top step of the porch with the manila envelope across my lap, and I waited. I did not have to wait long. At 1:55, I heard the sound of an engine on the gravel road. A heavy engine. A car engine, not a truck. A black Cadillac sedan came up the drive. It rolled slowly past the rusted gate. It stopped 20 feet from the porch. The dust drifted forward and settled. The driver's door opened first. A younger man in a gray suit got out. Mid-40s. Short black hair. Sharp tie. He had the kind of face that has practiced staying empty in mirrors. That would be Richard Slade. The back door opened. Walter Kane stepped out of the car. He was 70 years old. He was tall, 6'2", maybe lean for his age, in the way that men who have never done physical work but have always paid attention to their reflection stay lean. His hair was the soft silver of expensive money. He wore a long charcoal wool coat that had been cut for him by a tailor in a city neither of us had ever lived in. His shoes were polished. His face was tan in a way that meant a vacation home in someplace warm. He looked across the yard at me. His eyes were pale, the kind of pale you can see across a long room. He did not smile. He walked toward the porch. Slade walked one step behind him and to his left, like a small dog who has been trained where to stand. Kane stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He looked up at me. I looked down at him. "Caleb Brennan," he said. His voice was lower than I had expected. It had no accent. "Mr. Kane." He looked around. He looked at the porch sagging in the middle. He looked at the boarded windows. He looked at the wild vine climbing the west wall. He let his gaze travel over the property the way a man might look at a coat he was thinking of buying. "This is a very beautiful piece of land," he said. "I have always thought so." "Yes, sir. So did my grandfather." He looked back at me. A small thing moved at the corner of his mouth. It was not a smile. "May I sit? On the porch?" "Yes. There's a bench on the east side. I cleaned it off this morning." He nodded. He climbed the steps without hurry. Slade followed. We walked to the east side of the porch where two old wooden benches faced each other. Across a small wooden table. Walter Kane sat on one bench. Slade stood behind him. I sat on the other. I set the manila envelope on the table between us. The hawk circled overhead. "Mr. Brennan," Walter Kane said, "I'm going to make this very simple. I have been trying to acquire this property for 12 years. Your grandfather, may he rest, was a stubborn man. I respected him. We had disagreements. I am told you have inherited the property. I would like to make you an offer. I will pay you $300,000 cash by close of business this Friday for the land, the structures, and the mineral rights. You and your sister will walk away with enough money to start lives that I think you will both find very satisfying. And I'm told your sister wishes to attend college. I have a daughter at Stanford. I know what college costs. $300,000 will cover 4 years of an excellent education with a great deal left over for an apartment and a car. You will be free of this place and of every burden that comes with it. You will be free of me. I will not contact you again." He spread his hands. "That is my offer." I did not speak for a long moment. I let his words sit in the air between us. I looked at his pale eyes. I looked at his polished shoes on my grandfather's porch. Then I said very quietly, "No." His expression did not change. Not at first. The smile at the corner of his mouth stayed where it was, but something moved behind his eyes, a small, careful adjustment. "No. No, sir." 350. "No. 400. That is my final offer, Mr. Brennan. I do not negotiate further than that. $400,000. I shook my head. He sat back on the bench. He laid his arm along the rail. He looked out at the pasture. The hawk had drifted west. You are 18 years old, he said. Do you understand what $400,000 represents? Yes, sir. Tell me. It represents 12 years of my grandfather's life. It represents my grandmother's last summer in this house. It represents the night my grandfather walked out of this kitchen with one suitcase because you sent men to threaten his grandchildren. It represents every birthday I spent in a room with bunk beds and rules on the wall. It represents the day my sister stopped talking for 6 months when she was 9 years old because her foster parent told her that her real family hadn't wanted her. That's what $400,000 represents, Mr. Kane. It is a discount on 100 things I am not selling. Slade behind him shifted his weight. Walter Kane did not move. He looked at me for a long, quiet moment. His pale eyes did not blink. You are well spoken, he said. Thank you. Like him? Yes, sir, I have been told. He turned slightly towards Slade. He held out a hand. Slade reached into his briefcase and produced a thin folder, which he passed to Cowan. Kane opened it on the table between us. This is a quitclaim deed, he said. If you sign it today, you will receive $400,000 by Friday afternoon. If you do not sign it today, my offer reduces to $200,000 tomorrow, $100,000 the day after that, and so on. I am a patient man with all of my other holdings, Mr. Brennan. But I am not a patient man with this one. I have been waiting 12 years. I am going to own this piece of land. The only question is what you walk away with. I drew a long breath. I picked up the manila envelope from the table. I slid it across to him. Mr. Kane, I said, before you continue, please open that. He looked at the envelope. He looked at me. He picked it up. He undid the metal clasp. He pulled out the first stack of papers. The top page was a photocopy of the original loan document my grandfather had signed in May of 2014. 3 clauses were highlighted in yellow. He looked at it. He turned to the next page. A copy of one of the leather book pages. June 12, 2014. Visit from man calling himself Roberts. Said if I did not sign, my grandchildren would be removed from the home within 90 days. Said he had a friend at the State Child Welfare Office. Gave no surname. Walter Kane stopped turning the pages. He looked up at me very slowly. The pale eyes were no longer empty. There was something in them now. It was not anger. It was the look of a man who has been doing arithmetic in his head and has just realized the answer is not the one he had been counting on. Where, he said very softly, did you get these? My grandfather kept records, Mr. Kane. Every visit, every name, every threat. He started writing them down the week he signed your loan. He had a feeling. He was right to have it. This is one document. This is one page. There are 473 pages, Mr. Kane. They are in a safe place. There is a sworn affidavit from John Hassel in Bozeman, who was destroyed by your company under a different name in 2009. There is a second affidavit from a man named Earl Cottrell in Livingston. There is a third from a widow named Doris Plemons, whose husband killed himself in 2011, 3 weeks after a visit from a man matching the description of Mr. Slade here. Slade did not move, but his face changed in a way that was very small and very interesting. I have made copies, I said. My grandfather's attorney has copies. Eleanor Whitfield. You know her. Ezra Henderson at the hardware store has copies. And a registered envelope went out this morning to a reporter at the Montana Tribune named Sam Riley He will not open it unless he fails to hear from me by Friday at 5 p.m., or unless something happens to me or to my sister, in which case he will open it on Saturday morning. And on Sunday morning, Mr. Kane, your business will be on the front page of every newspaper in Montana. By Monday, it will be in the federal papers. By Tuesday, the FBI will be looking at every loan you have written in the last 15 years. The State Attorney General's office has already received an inquiry from Mrs. Whitfield's firm. They are waiting to see how this meeting goes. I leaned forward slightly. My hands were steady. I had not expected that. My grandfather spent 10 years preparing for this afternoon, Mr. Kane. 10 years. He sat in a cabin 20 miles from here on the property of a friend you never knew he had. And he wrote down everything you ever did. And he saved every dollar he could. And he built a door. The door opened yesterday morning. I walked through it. I am sitting in front of you now. The land is mine. The taxes are paid. The lien dies tonight by close of business under the terms of the foreclosure release Mrs. Whitfield filed at 9 this morning. And the only thing that stands between you and a federal investigation that will end your company is whether you stand up off this bench in the next 5 minutes and walk to your car and drive back to Bozeman and never speak my name or my sister's name again. The hawks circled above us. The wind moved across the pasture. Somewhere in the kitchen behind me, the kerosene lamp I had relit was still burning low and steady on the table. Walter Kane sat very still. He looked down at the photocopies in his hand. He turned one more page. He saw his own name written in my grandfather's careful blue ink under a date in November of 2014. In a sentence I had read the night before and committed to memory. Walter Kane, in person at the kitchen door, said, "Your grandchildren go into the system Friday unless you sign by Thursday. I have a friend at the state office. Her name is on the visitor log if you would like to know it. Refused to sign. He left. Snow on the ground." Walter Kane closed the folder. He set it down on the table. He looked up at me. The pale eyes were very tired. "How old are you, son?" 18. 18. He sat for a long moment. Then he stood up. He buttoned his coat. "Mr. Slade," he said without turning, "we are leaving." Slade picked up the briefcase. Walter Kane looked down at me one more time. He did not smile. He did not frown. His face was the face of a man who has reached the end of a long road and discovered that the door at the end of it is closed. "He was a better man than I was," he said. "I always knew it. I just thought I had more money." He turned. He walked to the steps. He went down them slowly, his hand on the rail. He walked across the gravel to the Cadillac. Slade opened the back door for him. He got in without looking back. Slade closed the door. Slade walked around to the driver's side. The engine started. The black car turned in a slow, careful circle on the gravel. The dust rose and drifted. I watched the taillights move down the long drive between the cottonwoods. I watched them turn at the bottom of the hill. I watched them disappear behind the trees. I did not move for a long time. Then I went into the kitchen and I sat at the table and I put my head down on my arms and I let my body shake for 15 straight minutes while the meadowlarks sang in the pasture outside. When it was over, I called Eleanor Whitfield. "He left," I said. "What did he say at the end?" I told her. She was quiet for a moment. "Caleb, he will not come back. Men like Walter Kane do not come back when they understand the math. The math just changed for him. The lien release will be on my desk by 5 o'clock. How can you be sure? Because he has more to lose than you do. He always has. He just didn't know you knew it." 3 days later, Slade called Eleanor's office with a settlement offer. $100,000 paid in cash in exchange for the originals of the documents. Eleanor relayed the offer to me by phone. I called Hannah from the porch. I read her the offer. She listened. "Cal," she said, "is this still blood money?" "Yes." "Then no." "Okay." We refused. 2 days after that, Kane Development Corporation formally released the lien on the property. The release was filed at the county courthouse on a Tuesday morning at 10:15. Eleanor sent me a photograph of the stamped document from her phone. The stamp was red. The date was clear. For the first time in 12 years, the Brennan Ranch belonged to the Brennans and to no one else. The next 2 months were paperwork and patience. Eleanor filed the petition for guardianship of Hannah with the family court in Lewis and Clark County. There were hearings. There were interviews. A social worker came out to the ranch twice. She walked through the house. She walked through the barn. She asked me questions about employment and finances and how I planned to provide for a 16-year-old. I showed her the deed. I showed her my bank balance, which was $5,000 and slowly growing. I showed her the garden plot I had cleared behind the house, where the first green shoots of lettuce and radishes were coming up. She wrote in her notebook. A judge approved the petition on July 20th. Hannah arrived 2 days later. It was a Thursday morning. I had been up since 4. I had painted the porch white. I had hung a flower box under the front window with petunias in it. I had mowed the front yard with an old push mower I had found in the barn and gotten running with help from Ezra. The grass was uneven and stubborn, but it was short. I had hung a wooden swing from the porch beam where the old one had rotted away. I had built that swing myself in the workshop with my grandfather's tools sitting on his stool by the lantern light 3 nights running. Eleanor's car came up the drive at 10:15. Hannah got out of the passenger side. She was taller than I remembered. Her hair was longer. She wore a denim jacket that did not quite fit her, and jeans that were too short. The standard uniform of a girl who has been moved between homes too many times to keep clothes that grew with her. She had a small duffel bag in one hand. She stood beside the car for a long moment and just looked. She looked at the white porch. She looked at the petunias. She looked at me standing in the doorway with my hands at my sides. She dropped the duffel bag in the gravel, and she ran across the yard, and she hit me hard enough that I had to brace myself on the door frame. And she put her face against my shirt, and she did not say anything for a long time. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. It was the smile I had been carrying in the back of my chest for 12 years. "It's real," she whispered. "It's real." She turned her face and looked out at the pasture. The sun was high. The grass was gold. The hawk was up there somewhere, doing its slow, patient work. "Cal." "Yeah." "We're home." "Yeah." I held her on the porch of my grandfather's house on land that had belonged to 4 generations of my family, and I felt the last cold piece of the stone that had lived in my chest since I was 6 years old crack and fall away. Eleanor stayed for lunch. We ate sandwiches at the kitchen table where Augustus Brennan had drunk his last cup of coffee, and Eleanor told Hannah stories about our grandfather that I had not heard yet. And Hannah laughed in a way I had not heard her laugh since she was small. And the kerosene lamp on the table flickered in a way that, if you were the kind of man who believed in such things, you might have called approval. The year that followed was hard. We patched the roof. We tore out the rotted floor in the back bedroom. We replaced the pipes under the kitchen. I learned to do plumbing from a book and from Ezra, who came out every Sunday and showed me which fittings to use and which to throw away. We painted the upstairs rooms. Hannah picked yellow for her room. I picked blue for mine, the soft blue of a clear Montana morning. We bought 4 chickens at a feed store and built them a coop from scrap lumber I found in the barn. The chickens were named Dolly, Rose, June, and Patsy by Hannah, who took it upon herself to know each one by face. We planted a real garden in the spring. Tomatoes, beans, squash, corn peppers, 3 kinds of lettuce. We did not know what we were doing. Half the corn failed. The squash took over half the yard. The tomatoes were the best I had ever tasted in my life. Hannah started online classes through a community college. She wanted to be a veterinarian. She talked about it every night at dinner. The way some girls talk about boys with that bright, fierce certainty that comes when a person finally knows what they want to be. She was 16. She was going to be 17 in September. She had time. Ezra Henderson came out every Sunday. He brought tools. He brought books. He brought stories. He sat on the porch in the evenings and told Hannah and me about our grandfather as a young man, about our grandmother, who he had also known and had loved like a sister, about the long history of this small piece of Montana that we now belong to. He was 73 years old. He had no children of his own. We became, over the slow months, something like family to him. Frank Doyle drove out every other week with groceries from town. He charged us cab fare for the trip out and refused payment for the groceries themselves. He sat at the kitchen table and drank coffee and told us about people in North Creek who remembered our grandfather and wanted us to know they were glad we were back. The town remembered. The town had been waiting too. The story of Kane development broke in the Montana Tribune in October, 4 months after Walter Kane had walked off our porch. Sam Riley, the reporter, had used the documents anyway with our permission. The article ran on the front page for 3 days. Other newspapers picked it up. The state attorney general opened an investigation. 3 other families came forward with their own stories. By Thanksgiving, Kane Development had been forced to settle a class action lawsuit that returned $12 million to 7 Montana families who had lost land in the previous 2 decades. Walter Kane himself was not charged criminally. He was too careful for that. But the company was finished. He retired to his vacation home in Arizona in January. He did not return to Montana. The 7 families had a small private gathering at our ranch in the spring. They came in pickup trucks and old sedans. Old men in seed caps, their wives, a few grown children. They walked the property with me. They told me stories about my grandfather they had known, and that I had not. 2 of them had been at his wedding in 1972. One of them, a man named Earl Cottrell from Livingston, sat down on the porch swing I had built and put his head in his hands and cried for 10 minutes without speaking. When he could speak, he said, "I always knew Gus was up to something. I never knew what. He just kept telling me to hold on. Hold on, Earl. The day will come." He said that to me at my wife's funeral in 2018. Hold on, the day will come. I gave him a glass of water. I did not say anything. There was nothing to say. One evening in early October, 18 months after I had first walked up that overgrown path with a cardboard box under my arm, Hannah and I sat on the porch swing as the sun set. Behind the western ridge, the air was cold. The garden was mostly done for the year. The chickens were settling into their coop. The sky was the color of a peach that has been left on a windowsill in late summer. Hannah handed me something, a small folded photograph. "I found this," she said, "in one of his books in the workshop. It was tucked inside a copy of Walt Whitman. I think he was reading it the last time he came out here." I unfolded it. A young man and a young woman standing on the porch of this house in front of a white wall that was newly painted. The man was tall and lean and serious. The woman had dark hair and a wide, easy smile. She was holding a small bunch of wildflowers. Her hand was on his arm. The house behind them was perfect, untouched, new. On the back in handwriting I now recognized as my grandmother's was a date and a single line. June 1975. Our forever home. I held the photograph in my hand. I looked up at the house behind us, the patched roof, the repainted porch, the flower box under the front window where the petunias had given way to chrysanthemums in autumn copper and gold, the light burning in the kitchen window where Hannah had left it on for the evening. It was not the house in the photograph. It was scarred. It had been broken. It had been left for dead. It had been brought back one nail at a time by a boy who had carried his life in a cardboard box, and a girl who had been told her family did not want her, and an old man in a hardware store who had kept a secret for 10 years. But it was standing. It was ours. Cal, Hannah said. Yeah. He'd be proud, wouldn't he? I thought about a man in a back row of an auditorium 9 years ago watching a 9-year-old boy spell patience. I thought about a man riding a train alone into the October dark in 2014 because he loved his grandchildren more than his own breath. I thought about a man who died in a chair by a window with a photograph in his hand, watching one last sunrise come up over a town he had refused to leave, even when leaving was the only thing that would save the people he loved. May, I said. I think he was proud the whole time. She leaned her head against my shoulder. We rocked. The light went out of the sky in long, slow gold bars across the pasture, and the first stars came out above the eastern ridge. And somewhere out in the dark, a coyote sang and another answered. And they sang together for a long, quiet moment. And then they went still. An inheritance, I have come to believe, is not the thing somebody hands you. It is not money. It is not land. It is not a house with a porch and a kitchen and a rocking chair facing the western window. An inheritance is a choice somebody made for you a long time before you were ready to make it for yourself. It is a door somebody built a long time before you knew you would need to walk through it. It is a love somebody kept for you all the years you thought you were alone. For 12 years, my story was the story of 2 children who had been left behind. This is the story I tell now. The story of 2 children who came home. If you have an abandoned ranch in your life somewhere, some old broken thing you have been told is past saving, I want you to know that the people who came before you may have left more than you can see. Look for the place where the work was done. Look for the place where the sweat of a life soaked into the wood. Look in the locket. Look in the photograph. Look in the kindness of the old man at the hardware store who has been waiting for you longer than you have known to wait for him. Sometimes the door is already built. Sometimes the only thing left after all the years and all the silence and all the long, cold dark is for you to find the key in your pocket and to walk up the steps and to put your shoulder to the door and to open it and to come home.